Since becoming a staff support engineer and, I assume, shifting away from personal ticket assignment to a more big picture, team enablement focus, do you feel less, more, or the same level of day-to-day stress? Or to put it another way, are you happier in your staff role than you were as a senior support engineer?
Yeah, good question, Justin. I find it much harder to know if I'm performing as staff, which, can sometimes add to the stress. As a senior, I set up views in Zendesk so I could measure some kind of baseline in terms of my performance, working tickets. But as staff, it's really not that clear cut at all. You absolutely are a manager of one when you're staff. It's rewarding in the same way, solving puzzles and learning new things, and the workload hasn't really changed. So in that respect, I'm as happy as I am. I'm as happy now as I am when I was a senior. I've got 18 months more experience now as well, so that gives me more confidence to do the job. That can make on-call less stressful, for example. On the other hand, I mean, my recollection of 2023 after I became staff was a series of escalations, and the last 5 months has been dominated by a complicated database performance issue that's taken a lot of time. And glibc index corruption has kicked off in a big way as well. But then those things would have happened anyway. It's got nothing to do with me being staff. It does mean I've had less time to do big picture stuff, though, that you referred to. I did create the database locks training module, which I encourage everyone to do. I envisage expanding the database training modules in the same way, probably more smaller modules that are quicker to do and get up to speed on a particular topic. So I started working on a Patroni module, for example, but it's pretty unwieldy, and I've not had time to return to it and get it polished off.
So I think a lot about happiness and stress now versus when I was a senior support engineer. Measuring and monitoring my happiness and stress levels are an important part of how I think about preventing and managing burnout. I would say that my stress is greater and different. So it's greater in the sense that I have many of the same stressors as before, but they are increased in intensity. And then there are some stressors that are removed but replaced with other new things to stress about. I do use Google Forms to keep track of happiness on a scale from 1 to 10, stress on a scale from 1 to 10, and just like an emoji to describe how I'm feeling that day. And two interesting things that I noticed. The first, happiness and stress sometimes increase together. And I think that's usually a sign that like something difficult is happening, but we're making progress, we're getting something done. So yeah, it's stressful, but we're getting something done, and I find that fulfilling. I do know though that whenever stress is extremely high for a sustained period of time, that is when, like, predictably, my happiness will go down. So, a thing that I definitely want to continue doing is keeping track of happiness and stress. I like Google Forms for that. I've been experimenting with using Luna Task for that purpose. So I'm really curious to hear how I respond to a question like this in an AMA like a year from now.
Thanks, Justin, for the question. So since becoming a staff support engineer and shifting away from personal ticket assignments, do I feel more, less, or the same level of day-to-day stress? So I think the stress hasn't necessarily increased, but it definitely has shifted. So yes, there is less of a focus on personal tickets. However, I still work on tickets where I can. And, technical work is still definitely my core focus, and it's one of the areas I enjoy the most. So, solving puzzles and interacting with customers. So as much as possible, I try to keep that up. But I think imposter syndrome is definitely more prevalent now being a staff because you've got your peers often looking to you for answers on complex issues. But, that's okay. And I've made peace with that because being staff means you're more acutely aware of the abilities and skills of your peers. So if there's something that I don't know the answer to, I will know who will know the answer. So that's also a good thing. In terms of other types of stresses, so there's definitely less stress from direct ticket work because I definitely feel very confident in that now, even when there's some unknowns. But I think the new challenges for me present itself in strategic planning. So I'm part of the leadership in the APAC region now, and that involves some future planning and looking into the crystal globe to see what's going to happen, and what can we invest our time in to better support the team. So things like AI have always been a growing interest to me, and I'm currently investing how we can utilize AI to improve how we work. But this is a developing skill for me, so at times I do feel a bit out of place, but I am quickly getting comfortable and getting up to speed.
So first of all, you are definitely correct in assuming that our focus is shifting away from personal ticket assignment and more to bigger picture team enablement stuff. Now, does that make me feel more or less stressed? And does that make me happier or not? Let's start with happiness. I am not happier. That might be a yet. I might just not be happier yet. Because, growing into a role is always rough for me. I think it's for most people, but obviously I'll always just speak for me. Comes with constant self-doubt. Imposter syndrome kicks into a new gear. And I think that's natural though, right? Because we have that mindset of you're being promoted when you're already executing at that level, which means that shortly before the promotion, you are the super best, amazing senior support engineer in that case. And then you get promoted, and now that is just the baseline. Hopefully, at least the baseline, right? That's exactly the kind of doubt. It should, of course, just mean that if you continue doing what you're doing, you're fine, but it can be hard to accept that. And I also think that people who go for stuff kind of naturally have this tendency to always want to grow, not necessarily with a specific goal in mind. I have zero plans or aspirations for getting promoted further at the farm. That's not on my mind at all. But I always want to get better at what I'm doing, right? So I'm always doubting myself, and being in a fresh new role with expectations that aren't as clear, that is a fertile breeding ground for these kinds of feelings. So that's, I think, what makes it happy, or makes being happy hard. But I want to be clear, I'm not unhappy, right? It's really just in comparison, I'm not happier. I also think that it does have an impact that support itself is going through changes, not even just support, like the whole organization, right? Like more enterprise targeted. There is just, everything is always in motion, of course, but I think we are going through quite some changes, and not all of them are necessarily happy changes. That's just what it is. So yeah, it can be challenging to navigate. With that in mind, it's probably not coming as a surprise, and definitely more stressed with a lot of the same reasons that I just gave, I think. So I don't think the staff support engineer role is inherently more stressful than the senior role. On the contrary, honestly, if I'm looking at for example, how in the EMEA region we now have a shift system for support engineers, I'm not part of the shift system, which I personally think is one way to not experience as much stress. So I get stress from other sources, plenty. But there is differences, and I don't think it's just the role that is more stressful. It's while you're growing into a role, I think it's automatically more stressful. And I definitely think that I don't know, 1-2 years down the road, when I'm as comfortable in the staff position as I was in the senior position at the end of that part of my journey, I don't think I will feel more stressed in comparison at that point.